Death. We all fear it. We run from it. We try everything in our power to not think about it. And yet, we're drawn to it, over and over. From our stories to our customs to our cultures, death, whether we want to think about it or not, is part of every day of our lives in some form. And it's stories that help us define, process, and even embrace death when our lives try to keep it at arm's length. Really, death is a grand tradition in all forms of narrative. Does death have a form? Hades from Greek myth. Does death have value in life? Hamlet by Shakespeare. Could there be life beyond death? Essentially, every religion in the history of the world. Really, so many great films are all about our relationship to death. And it's the overwhelming desire to run from it, hide from it, and ultimately embrace it that powers one of the all-time great independent horror movies, 1962's Carnival of Souls. Made for a shoestring budget and with the crew that had been making industrial films for years, Carnival of Souls shares so much in common with George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Really, it shares everything in common with Romero's film except for the acclaim and worldwide inspiration that Romero's film went on to have. Yet, in many ways, Carnival is a more haunting and memorable film whose reputation has only grown in the decades since. And as the days get shorter and the nights get colder, I can't help but think about how short and delicate life is, and how long and immense eternity might be. Join me on the other side, won't you, as we take part in the Carnival of Souls. For as long as the genre has existed, horror has been used by new and emerging creators to break into the film industry. And it makes sense. Horror is cheap to make, it draws a big crowd on debut, and it can bring in an easy profit and a lot of acclaim for visionary creators. And the same goes for the origin of Carnival of Souls. But Carnival also highlights another aspect of filmmaking that many have forgotten over time: the industrial film. As film became easier to make and became integrated into educational content, industrial films became their own industry outside of feature-length entertainment. These are sponsored films that serve a practical, educational purpose and are paid for by a business, government entity, or other organization to inform their audience about part of their focus. Need to make sure your warehouse workers practice proper baler safety? Industrial film. Trying to help hunters use their game and wildlife tags right? Industrial film. Want to scare young drivers into safe habits through the use of gruesome real-life car crash images? Industrial film. This is the background of George A. Romero and John Russo that led to the creation of Night of the Living Dead, and the exact same history and drive informs the making of Carnival of Souls. During the 1950s, Harold, aka Herk Harvey, worked for educational and industrial film studio Centron in Lawrence, Kansas, making countless films for the company over the years and making a living. But Harvey had aspirations of breaking into feature films when he was struck with inspiration from one strange and unmistakable building. Salt Air, an old abandoned pavilion built off the shores of the Great Salt Lake in Utah and left to rot as the lake shrunk away from it and business dried up. Harvey spotted Salt Air, actually the Salt Air 2 after the 1893 original, which was built by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the Salt Lake and Los Angeles Railway, burned down, driving back from Los Angeles to his home in Lawrence, Kansas, and stopped to explore the abandoned grounds, with the building's grand ballroom in particular making an impression. The whole place looked sort of weird, said Harvey. I just cataloged it away. Soon after, Harvey had fellow Centron employee John Clifford write a script for him, with the director providing very little direction other than to end up at the ballroom. As for the origins of the film that would become Carnival of Souls, Clifford and Harvey were never pretentious about their inspirations or goals. They simply found a good opportunity and wanted to make the most of it, with Clifford saying, "At that stage in my career, I would have written anything." And I said, "What kind of story do you want?" And he said, "I don't know, but I wanted to end up with dead people dancing in a ballroom by the Great Salt Lake." And I said, "Sounds good to me." And after 3 weeks, the script was written, a team was assembled, and it was time for production to get underway. The resulting film, Carnival of Souls, follows young woman Mary Henry, played by Candice Hilligoss, who is the sole survivor of a deadly joyriding car accident that sends her plunging into a river off the side of a bridge. Haunted by her survival, Mary soon moves out of Kansas and to Salt Lake City for work as a church organist. However, Mary's haunting soon becomes quite literal as she encounters visions of a ghoulish man everywhere she goes. And while she tries to make connections in her new home, Mary becomes more and more isolated, driven mad by apparitions and drawn to an abandoned pavilion as death comes to take her. When it comes to the term independent filmmaking, I don't think you can get any truer of an indie than Carnival of Souls. Made for a total of $17,000 in cash and $13,000 in deferred funds, Harvey's film was truly made for barely any money, as Harvey and Company got local Kansas business owners to finance it by chipping in about $500 apiece. Thankfully, there was very little for the crew to spend money on throughout the production. Without stages and without money to pay for location shooting, so much of Carnival of Souls was shot on location and without a permit. Instead, Harvey's guerrilla filmmaking approach was shoot first, ask for permission later, sometimes bribing workers on site to get a scene done and moving fast. And luckily, Carnival was filmed at supremely inexpensive locations throughout Lawrence, with Harvey revealing that after asking for local government permission, they legitimately broke through the side of the bridge with their car for the crash and had it hauled out of the river. Sounds expensive, right? Well, when the bill came due to fix the guardrail, it was only $12. Oh man, the 60s. Similarly, the massive Saltaire Pavilion only cost $50 to rent for the shoot, with the grand abandoned ballroom still strung with decorations from when it was abandoned and the lights still working with only a little help from an electrician. It's strokes of luck like this and shooting on real locations with a minimal need for effects that makes Carnival look so much better than how much it costs to make. And really, I think it's shot very well. Nothing flashy, but Harvey uses slow, patient shots that linger on Mary's strange realizations to underline her mounting fears and isolation. Of course, the black and white cinematography works wonders here. Cheaper to shoot on, it adds an otherworldly quality the film desperately needs to take everyday locations and push them into the supernatural. Now, a drive down the highway is a descent into darkness. A department store dressing room is an isolating experience. And when the supernatural elements really come to the forefront, I think that Harvey and cinematographer Maurice Prather do wonderful work at creating an eerie and intimately strange experience. Deepening shadows, changes in film speed, and sudden cutaways to dark figures, the pavilion and the nameless man, played by Harvey himself, face caked in pale grease paint and hair filled with salt, disturb and disquiet. But Carnival of Souls doesn't really play on jump scares. Sure, Mary is frequently frightened. Her gasping, fourth wall breaking trip to see her doctor is awesome. But we often see what's coming before she does, and dread its impact on her unraveling mind. And of course, you can't talk about Carnival of Souls without discussing its score. Created by Gene Moore, the entirety of the film's score is played on an organ, with the majority of the film heavily using the music to create an ethereal, haunting quality that I think does a ton of heavy lifting for the film's atmosphere. It's also perfectly in tune with the story as well, with Mary an organist herself and playing for a local church as her profession. And yet, Mary isn't a believer, just a musician in search of a living. And so while Mary at first plays beautiful worship music, her descent into madness twists the sounds of her organ into a whirling dark melody that accompanies the ghouls and ghosts that hide in the shadows. It's really an amazing piece of work, and I don't think Carnival of Souls would have nearly the same amount of impact as it does without its score. The massive, empty halls of Saltaire, the dark night drives, the growing sense of isolation within a spirit world, all are thematically linked to the organ, which itself feels like an ancient piece of Americana, linking the modern world with the gothic pre-industrial world full of superstitions and fears. As far as performances go, the acting of Carnival of Souls is easily its weakest aspect. Extras and bit parts are all played pretty stiffly, with some opening scene ADR being really fake sounding and highlighting the limitations of the production.
We were the first ones on the bridge, and coming along, following the tracks, and they wanted to get around us, I guess, and they lost control.
Still, I think the two central performances are strong and help carry the film on. As John, the pushy neighbor who becomes romantically interested in Mary despite her clear disinterest, Sydney Berger does well balancing the need for sorely lacking human connection with being a big creep. It's a minor tragedy that Mary's only real connection to the living world is through a man who pushes her for sex, is a proud alcoholic.
Now me, I not only drink really, I really drink.
And can't understand anything about her, essentially pushing her into the arms of our supernatural avatar of death by the end. As Mary, I think that Candice Hilligoss is putting on a strong performance that moves back and forth between low-key madness and escalating terror. A trained actor and professional model, Hilligoss is clearly game for anything Harvey threw at her, later discussing how the low-budget production meant she had to do everything on set, saying, "I learned that low budget means you don't have a double, you don't have a stunt woman, you don't have a makeup person, you do your own makeup. It also meant you go into the water for 8 hours at a time, and the director had promised me an Indian summer in late September, and somehow, Indian summer didn't come." I think there's just enough ambiguity to have it never fully defined for the viewer, and as such, I think that Carnival plays as a really gripping portrayal of mounting mental illness. Following her brush with death, Mary is traumatized and unable to connect with anyone else. She has this sense of a growing psychosis that isolates her and makes reality more and more dangerous around her. She can't discern what's real from what's imaginary, and she slowly loses everything about her own personality as she begins to hyperfixate on the one object that she thinks will solve everything. But Clifford's script also underlines the realistic dangers in everyday life for women. There's no support in society, medicine, or the church. She's judged by everyone, even other women, for what they perceive her to be. And she's vulnerable to John, who frequently pushes past her boundaries and gets her alone in her rented room, spying on her, pushing for sex, and never relenting in demanding what he wants. These are all different little elements in service to Carnival's story about losing everything and passing on, but I think they come together to create a truly effective, isolating, sad, and haunting experience. There's really two sides to Carnival's story. On one is the supernatural, full of strange visions, the mysterious, ghoulish man, and the mystery of what's really going on. On the other side is the much more mundane struggles that vary from navigating a new job to finding new connections with strangers in a new city to fending off romantic advances of anyone new in our life.
I don't want to be left alone!
Before going any further into Carnival of Souls, I think it's important to discuss the film's twist ending. Honestly, the film's big surprise shouldn't come as much of a shock to anyone who's paying attention and familiar with these tropes, and the movie is more than 60 years old, so I don't think it really mandates a spoiler warning, but spoilers anyway. Okay, so it turns out that Mary has been dead the whole time, having drowned in the opening car crash and dredged up from the river at the very end of the film after she succumbed to our ghoul and his ghostly entourage. On one hand, I think that Clifford's script does a good job at making Mary's reality unclear and changing so that we can never truly pin down what's real, what's a hallucination, and what's the afterlife. On the other, this is the type of story that's been told for centuries. So I guess super duper spoilers for the entire history of fiction from this point on. Done poorly and she's been dead the whole time can be a pretty cop-out ending, second only to Everything Was a Dream. But I think Carnival of Souls works really well because the entire film is leading to that acceptance of death and moving on, instead of having a completely different story disrupted by a twist for twist's sake. And ultimately, I think that's what separates the dead all along from the dream all along endings. Dreams have no true correlation to reality. Whether you believe in dreams having some supernatural meaning to them, or just the byproduct of our brains trying to sort out our lives, they're ultimately only worlds inside our head that never truly existed. Death is very real. It's real for everyone, regardless of what they believe. It defines every life. It's the period on the end of each of our sentences, and how we ultimately experience it is unknown to everyone on this side of life. One of the earliest examples of the story, and one that I think Carnival is playing the most heavily off, is Ambrose Bierce's short story An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Written all the way back in 1890, the short, first published in the San Francisco Examiner, tells the story of slave owner Peyton Farquhar, who is about to be hanged in the midst of the American Civil War for his plan to destroy a bridge. But when Farquhar is dropped, the rope snaps, sending him plunging into the river below and on a mad dash back home to his wife to escape. You can see where this is going. It's all a dream played out in his head at the moment of his hanging, ending with, a blinding white light blazes all about him with a sound like the shock of a cannon. Then all is darkness and silence. Peyton Farquhar was dead. His body, with a broken neck, swung gently from side to side beneath the timbers of the Owl Creek Bridge. The twist ending is, of course, the major claim to fame of Bierce's story, but what I think makes Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge work so well is the way in which it's all told. This is a first-person narration that blends past, present, and hallucination to make a whirling, disorienting experience that actually only unfolds in the span of a few minutes. The result is that the reader is confused, doubts, hopes, and ultimately despairs in the span of just a few pages. And in the nearly century and a half since, there have been countless films, TV shows, books, video games, and more that all exist in this liminal space between life and death. Some films play the reveal of a character's death as a big ghost story twist. The Sixth Sense and the others are some of the most famous examples, with the dead lingering on in the land of the living and affecting people because they haven't accepted their own passing yet. And while Carnival of Souls has something in common with these stories, it's the state of being in and exploring the amorphous space between worlds that's the main focus of Carnival. This is much more in line with films like Donnie Darko, which shifts our lead character into an alternate universe caused by avoiding a destined death, and Jacob's Ladder, where a tormented Vietnam veteran's return to society is filled with visions of heaven and hell's battle over his soul, until it's revealed that he's been dying from friendly fire in the war all along. History is filled with stories of people who have either nearly died or have passed and been resuscitated, with all sorts of differing accounts on what it feels like, what they saw, and how it changed them afterward. Look at enough and you can never truly create a consistent picture of what it looks like and what's on the other side, but that only makes everyone more curious, or even afraid, of death. But that's what stories are for. They give us a definable, understandable narrative that helps us make sense of chaos and give meaning to something that means both everything and nothing in the world. Carnival of Souls gives minimal explanation to its narrative, leaving Mary's experience unclear. Is this a hallucination? A spiritual journey? Is she a ghost wandering through the world of the living? You can't truly pin it down, and I think that's what makes it so captivating. All we truly know is that there's no escape, and by the end, Mary's obsession with the pavilion brings her into the orbit of the man and leads to her end. No hope for escape, just an eternity in the realm of the dead. It's a long, slow descent into the night without a hope for a return. A herald of darkness without a champion of light, if you will. After its completion, Carnival of Souls was released on September 26, 1962, as part of a double feature with The Devil's Messenger. However, the comparisons to Night of the Living Dead continued on for the worse. The US distributor Hertzline International Corporation failed to include a copyright on US prints, automatically entering it into public domain stateside. And while Hertzline quickly struck TV deals across the country, their first royalty check to Harvey bounced, with the company going out of business in 1964. The result was that Carnival of Souls' theatrical run was minimal, but it went on to be played as a regular on syndication across TVs for decades, slowly building up a reputation as a late-night classic that captured the imaginations of countless people stumbling across it for the first time. And honestly, that's perfect for a film like this. Harvey's film is full of atmosphere, has minimal story, and has this dreamy quality to it that captures your attention no matter when you enter. What better way to be sucked into this story than by happening on it by chance and letting it take over your world for an hour? For me, Carnival of Souls has a sort of comforting darkness. It's a story about the abandonment of dreams and the inevitable march toward death. It can be scary, but there's also a sort of warm familiarity to it. Maybe that's a sort of cold comfort, but when I was deciding what I wanted to talk about next in a video, I was drawn toward this movie, and I chose to write my way out of the dark place that I found myself in by focusing on this story. As for Harvey and the rest of the Carnival crew, this was the only feature film most of them worked on, returning to industrial films or other work as Carnival wasn't the true breakthrough into features they were hoping for. Harvey would work at Centron for 35 years, spending his career continuing to make industrial films. But don't think of that as a sad ending. "I took a vacation and shot Carnival of Souls in 2 weeks," said Harvey. "I've been to festivals and people always ask, how come you made only one film? And I say, hell, I've made over 400. When you work someplace for 35 years making educational and industrial films, and the one feature that you make is really what you're known for, a film on which you spend a total of maybe 5 weeks, that to me doesn't seem right. Some of the things I'm much more proud of, we did in the industrial area. We shot hour-long films in 2 days, musicals with people like Eddie Albert and Ed Ames and so on. Some of those with skits and original music and all that are really kind of interesting. And I think that many of the other films that we made in the educational and industrial area really had something to say. Yet, as you say, I'm known for Carnival of Souls. Over time, Carnival of Souls' reputation grew to the point of getting many art house screenings by the early 90s, even getting its own little documentary, The Movie That Wouldn't Die, and a critical reappraisal and love that was decades in the making, but thankfully was shown before Harvey died in 1996 at the age of 71. Many have said it's likely an inspiration on the works of David Lynch, as can be seen in the blend of the supernatural and heartland Americana, as well as the fact that John Clifford worked for years as the songwriting partner of Lynch's longtime composer, Angelo Badalamenti. There was also a remake of Carnival of Souls in 1998, produced by Wes Craven and written and directed by Adam Grossman, which has barely anything in common with the original, and decides that the film would be improved by the inclusion of a, murdering rapist clown. It's a good thing old Herk was already dead before he could see this shit, or he'd have died of shame. But the remake has been relegated to bargain bins and free streaming in the years since, while Harvey's original film has remained a beloved piece of supernatural and psychological horror. It captures the imagination because it shares our same obsessions and fears. When will death come for us? What will it be like? Who waits for us on the other side? However we go, and whenever it may be, only one thing's for certain. We all go to the other side alone. Thanks for watching today's video, and I'm back with some horror after a little bit of a break from it after Halloween. Carnival of Souls is a topic that I've had floating around in my to-do list for quite a while. It's a pretty long list and it continues to grow. And while I thought about doing it for Halloween, I just didn't get the chance to get around to it. But as I was searching for the next video to do, and dealing with some stuff outside of making videos, yes, I do other things besides make videos, Carnival of Souls really popped out to me as something that I wanted to talk about. It's dark, it's haunting, it's eerie, it's indefinable, and it has that great quality that can only come from a scrappy indie production with talented people behind the camera but limited by what they could actually do. Still, I think that Carnival of Souls is a classic in its own right in the horror genre. And while it shares a lot of similarities in its production to Night of the Living Dead, it's definitely a lesser known film because it didn't kickstart an entire career and an entire subgenre like that one did. Obviously, Harvey had other aspirations in life besides making feature films, but I think this shows a clear talent of his behind the camera and for many other people that worked on this film. The atmosphere, the look, the amazing score, Carnival of Souls leaves an impression once you've seen and experienced it. And if you've never seen it before, hopefully this video causes you to check it out because it's really worth your time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Carnival of Souls, some of your favorite true indie productions in film, and your own favorite supernatural horror. As always, a huge thanks to my patrons and members for their continued support, and if you'd like to be a patron or member, it's only $2 a month for early access to every video and exclusive reviews. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and thinking about the other side.